Welcome, everyone. Glad to see you here for Two-Way Tonight. I don't want you to think this is a rerun, but I'm going to start pretty much the way I started last night. We have two great guests, and there's so much news, I can barely process it. Once again, I could reshuffle the lineup of stories from A to R in lots of different orders, and you wouldn't accuse me of not leading with the lead. So we've done our best to stack everything up to tell you what's happened during the day and project forward, and we'll do that with our guests. Slightly different format tonight because our guests are so damn good. I'm going to let them kind of color commentate the newscast. So rather than showing you a bunch of videos and doing the full news, I'm going to do it with them. Thank you for joining. If you want to be in on the conversation to ask questions of our two great guests, please raise your hand if you're here on the Two-Way platform. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube or X, all I have to say to you is don't put smack in the chat. Peace, love, and understanding always. This program brought to you by the Bahnsen Group, David Bahnsen's outfit that helps folks invest their money wisely. At the end of the program, I'll tell you about an opportunity to join me and David in a few days at a great private event for the Two-Way community. Now, who are our guests tonight? Not Mark Caputo, who was touted as our guest, and he either canceled or we canceled him. I don't want to say which, but all I can tell you is he's not here. And you'd think, well, maybe I don't need to watch if you don't have Caputo. In fact, it's kind of an upgrade, one could argue. First, making his debut appearance on this program, I believe, Robbie Suave of Reason Magazine, senior editor. Robbie, welcome in. You ever watched this show before?
It's great to be with you. I see your clips posted in various places on social media.
Okay. All right. Well, the full show is a marathon. Now, our other guest, I don't know if you know. Do you know John Sununu, the former New Hampshire senator? Do you know him?
I know who he is, yes.
He's our other guest.
I only know the old guys at Reason, like Gillespie.
Yeah. Welcome in, both of you. Senator, so glad to have you here. New Hampshire, much in the news, so we're going to want to ask you about that. Your old Senate seat is now going to be up for grabs, and there's talk that one of your relatives might run. So we'll find out the truth or falsity.
Don't get excited about me breaking any news.
All right, I won't be excited. Can you guys name the movie, the classic movie, where the main character used the word falsity? Falsity. Does that ring a bell? It's an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Norman Bates says falsity. Psycho. Yeah. Anyway, Psycho is the film. Thank you again, everybody, for joining. As I said, if you want to be in the conversation, please raise your hand. So, guys, here's how I want to do this. It's a little unorthodox. We did no prep. I'm going to read the news headlines, and there's many. And you guys act like you're Tony Roma. Roma, is that his name? Or what's the guy's name who played for the Patriots? That quarterback
Chris Collinsworth.
Chris Collinsworth. No, but who's the famous quarterback who played for the Patriots? You know,
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady, exactly. You guys just shout it out. Don't wait to be called on. Just kibitz with each other, with me. Just play right off the headlines. Don't worry about talking over each other because this platform can handle that. Here we go. And again, thank you both for making time. Late breaking news. There almost certainly won't be a shutdown now because Senator Schumer, it's being reported, told his colleagues that he will vote for cloture on the attempt of Senator Thune to bring the House continuing resolution to the floor. That means there's two Democrats now on record. Schumer did it privately, but it's been widely reported to vote for cloture. So that bill will get to the floor and will certainly have 50 votes to pass. So no shutdown. Thoughts, gentlemen?
Note to Kristen Gillibrand, scream at the Democrat Senate lunch anytime you want. It's very effective. I salute her. I don't know what she said, but it was heard around the Capitol.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
What I suspect is that the Democrats thought about this for more than 5 seconds, and their whole messaging right now is that Republicans are destroying the government, what Elon Musk is doing, all of that. And so if they are perceived to cause a shutdown, doesn't that go against what they're trying to, position on right now? And I think they thought about it and said, you know what, I know we want to be perceived as doing something for our supporters. We haven't quite figured out what that thing should be yet. And they realized correctly, in my view, that being seen as responsible for a shutdown would just work against what the chaos. They're saying the other party's chaos, but nobody wants a shutdown. I think that's what happened.
I agree with that. But in a way, they really didn't realize that because Schumer came out and made it sound like they were going to oppose it, which is why Kristen Gillibrand ended up screaming in the Senate lunch. which really is quite a tactical error for someone like Chuck, who has a lot of experience. He understands leadership. He understands the dynamics of conferences generally in his Democrat Senate conference. He should have known how this was going to end, that it
Yeah.
was going to end with a number of his Democrats wanting to vote with the Republicans. And tactically, he should have gone to Thune and gotten something for it in advance.
Yeah.
And so instead, all he got was looking bad.
Yeah. I'll tell you something, and I don't mean to disparage either of you in terms of your regular, frequent contact with the far left grassroots. But I'm telling you, one of the most undercovered story in politics right now is the degree to which Schumer and his House counterpart and fellow Brooklynite, Hakeem Jeffries, are facing nonstop pressure, not just from the liberals in their caucuses, but from the so-called groups who just demanded that they not vote for this. So
what's the source of their leverage, though, Mark, at the moment over those two people in particular?
Great question. The source of their leverage is typical of what the sources of leverage are, which is they're the grassroots, they're the energy, they're the squeaky wheels, they're loud, and they are demanding more emotionally than the center that they do something. And how are they threatening them? They're demanding meetings. They're threatening to withhold money. They're threatening to go public with their complaints. Yeah. You, if you were Chuck Schumer, would be like, yeah, okay, go do what you do, because we know where this is going to end up. But for some reason, the two of them, for the last few weeks in particular, according to my reporting, have just been hammered by the groups. And for some reason, I've done my best to tell you why. They're not inclined to buck them, and that's supported by the squad and the other far left folks in both caucuses. So it's a real problem. And of course, as you pointed out, he ended up exactly where he had to end up. I don't think he could have gotten anything from Thune. I don't think Thune was going to offer him anything. Maybe a fig leaf, but not anything real.
That is the problem, is the weak shape that they're in. You're absolutely right that the groups don't like leadership. But also, nobody really does. I think it would be politically okay to start, calling out or not doing anything the far left wants if you had a good base of support elsewhere in the Democratic coalition. But it just seems like everyone is frustrated from all different angles with the leadership not having any strategy. And so that's what's coming out here. They don't really know what they're doing, and no one is saying, wow, these guys are really doing a great job fighting back against Trump. In fact, their best idea is like, let's just do nothing, right? That was James Carville's idea the other day.
Right.
If we don't have a good plan, let's do nothing and hope that dealt a more favorable hand in the future. For all I know, that can happen.
Neither of you are lawyers, I don't believe, because you're smarter than that. Two legal things today, and as regular viewers of the program know, I try not to do much legal news or tariff news because it's all ephemeral. It's like one decision, one tweet about a tariff, like it's all going to change by the time I finish talking. But two significant legal developments today. A federal judge in San Francisco ordered 6 government agencies to offer fired probationary federal workers their jobs back, calling the firing process a sham. Recall that probationary workers are not people who are on probation for doing something wrong. They're people who've moved into new jobs recently, and this decision will be appealed. It could well be overturned, but for now, you got a federal judge saying they have to be hired back. I don't know if they'll be forced to begin the rehiring process before a higher court hears it or not. The other thing that happened, which is somewhat related, and I've been waiting for some president, particularly a Republican president, to bring this case. Donald Trump's asking the Supreme Court to eliminate the ability of district court judges to block his agenda. The specific case is on birthright citizenship, but this is something that drives a lot of particularly conservatives, but I think anybody who sort of thinks about America crazy, which is some district court judge in some part of the country makes a ruling and it's binding over the whole country. It's not the Supreme Court. It's not even the Court of Appeals. So the president's legal team is saying, why should some district court judge have relevance beyond that district? So you guys want to comment on either or both of those cases? You can pass, but if you'd like to, I'd like to hear from you.
I don't know enough about the courts to comment on the second one, except to say that I think Supreme Courts generally, and this one in particular, is inclined to give a lot of deference to lower courts and to take the attitude, no, look, we know our job and we'll do our job when it comes to us, but we're not going to interfere unnecessarily with the appellate process. On the first point, though, the firings, look, I think about all of these firings in a way together. The firing of the inspectors general, the probationary firings, the termination program or buyback program, if you will, and now some of the firings that are taking place in the executive agencies under the hand of the secretaries. To me, the real question is, what power does the president have over employment within the executive branch? And I think these are all going to go to the Supreme Court one way or another. And I think the court will largely rule in the president's favor. Slightly different ways. But this is, in a way, something that really hasn't been tested at the Supreme Court. And the problem or the issue comes from Congress passing laws over time that set restrictions on the ability of the president to oversee executive branch employees. They have a certain term. They can only be fired for certain reasons. They're calling them independent, all sorts of things. And I think those are going to be tested. People like to talk about the unitary executive and invoke Dick Cheney and make it sound awful and negative. But it's about the separation of powers, right? The separation of the legislative branch from the executive. To what extent should the legislative branch be allowed to put restrictions on the day-to-day operation and personnel within the executive branch? And I think this court's going to take a very limited view of the ability of Congress to do those things.
Robbie, before you jump in, let me say two things. Three things. Number one, I agree with everything the senator said, with the small exception of I never predict judges, justices, or juries. I think he's right. That's probably how they'll rule, but you never know. First, I agree. Second, I don't predict. Third is, Robbie, I'm a little bit older than you, so I'm going to pass on some wisdom. Before you ever disagree with a Sununu, think not once, not twice, but think 3 times, unless it's Chris. And so if you're inclined to disagree with anything he said, take a moment and consider.
No, I'm not particularly inclined to disagree. I was just going to add that, in this question of deferring to the district judges, it's really interesting because Amy Coney Barrett has been more inclined to do that, and it is making conservatives very frustrated with her, despite being a justice with a fairly conservative track record in terms of her actual ideology. I'm seeing a lot of anger about her from people on the right because she's not agreeing rapidly enough that the Supreme Court should be making these decisions. In terms of what Trump and Elon is doing to get rid of federal employees, it just does always come back to me that, at this unique moment in time, they do control also Congress. They don't have a 60 majority in Congress, but they could try to do more of these things through Congress. I mean, this is what Thomas Massie and Rand Paul and a few other people have been, shouting into the void about. Like, can we actually try to reduce government employment, government spending, cancel out departments through the mechanism prescribed by the Constitution while we actually have the power to do that? And they're getting, I think, pretty frustrated that they're feeling ignored on that front. You could try to do it that way, and then you wouldn't set yourself up for some of these conflicts that are inevitably going to come through in the court, where I think you're going to find that there's broad discretion to fire employees, maybe not so much broad discretion to cancel out various funding packages without the explicit agreement of Congress. Now we're in a weird situation where sometimes Congress just doesn't actually want to do its job of legislating. Like, congressional Republicans are happy to give away their power to manage anything because they just like being on TV. Our founders didn't exactly foresee that coming. They foresaw conflict, right, between the executive and the Congress, whereas the conflict is between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, not between the branches in and of themselves.
So on the point of spending, I think the Republican members, House and Senate, are slowly warming and actually waking up to the idea of their rescission power. So the Impoundment Act, 74 Impoundment Act, which is getting a little press, it prohibits the president, theoretically, from withholding funds. But it also sets up a prescribed legislative process for rescinding funds. and that is the president can make a request of Congress to rescind funds. It's privileged in the Senate, so it only requires 51 votes in the Senate. It requires a straight majority in the House. My advice to them has been, do this now, do it soon, start small, pick the most indefensible thing. Mr. President, go through the process. Now, I think that maybe some legal minds in the White House are holding out hope. The whole thing is ruled unconstitutional, so they can just not spend any money they want. But tactically, there's a real value in doing that rescission package, showing how the process works, and winning. And one of the most important things of what's about to happen, based on your reporting with Schumer, Mark, is the House Republicans, these crazy House Republicans that did dumb things like weakening their own speaker last term, are about to realize what winning feels like. They passed this, it's only a CR, but it's their CR. And they got to see Schumer squirm, and they got to see Republicans win in both the House and the Senate. And they also saw the president weigh in. And I think, winning begets winning. And so that could have an important psychological effect in getting that House Republican caucus to work together a little bit more.
I totally agree, and I've cited you before when you're here and when you're not here. But Robbie, many years ago, Senator Sununu told me it's some ways better to have a narrow majority than a slightly bigger majority. Because if it's so narrow, there's no margin of error, then there's no groups of House members banding together saying, hey, let's tank the bill or let's threaten to tank the bill. And I think you can't take for granted that they're going to be able to raise the debt ceiling with whatever vehicle they do, that they're going to be able to pass final passage of reconciliation or anything else that they're going to try to do as a party in the House. But I totally agree with you, and it's an under-discussed point that what is about to happen is going to make them say, hey, if we stick together from Brian Fitzpatrick in the center to the Freedom Caucus on the right, do what President Trump and Speaker Johnson want, good things happen. Let's keep going. Because the next big thing up is let's avoid the biggest tax increase in history, and let's cut a bunch of taxes, and let's do a bunch of stuff on immigration and energy. And they all support that. They'll have to figure out what to do about lowering my taxes through raising the cap on the state and local thing. But anyway,
I see a fig leaf.
Yeah,
I see a fig leaf in the future.
Yes,
on salt. It's going to happen.
I agree. All right. Next topic is, how are Americans thinking about what's going on with the Trump administration on DOGE and tariffs and everything else? Two new polls out today, one from CNN, one from some academic school that polls all the time. I can't remember, Quinnipiac or Monmouth or somebody, basically showing the same thing. President's numbers are down a little bit. The floor is not collapsing, but the numbers are down. People don't think he's doing that great a job on the economy. And then there's two issues where elite opinion is slapping me in the face every day. And on one, the whole week, which is on tariffs, and the other is on cuts to medical research. Okay? Here's what elites are saying. And these are on Wall Street. These are universities. Johns Hopkins is firing like 2,000 people because of the cuts in medical research. So here's what people are, and the markets were down. So that's one indice of what some people are thinking. What elites are saying to me is tariff war is a nightmare, losing confidence in the economic team, thinks the president's just out of his mind and too mercurial and inconsistent. And then on the medical research, again, these are Republicans saying, I've got a kid who's got a disease, and this is hard. This is a nightmare. And I know a really qualified scientist who's leaving the government because they're cutting all her funding. This is anecdotal. It's massive. If you had access to my emails and texts, you'd see it's massive. But Robbie, is this a problem that the White House is going to have to address? The tariffs and medical research cuts, it's just a bridge too far what they're doing.
I would actually split those things in two. I do think the tariffs, they have this immediate effect on the economy in terms of the stock market tanking. I think people do intuitively understand that, if the construction materials for building houses cost more, then houses cost more, and so on and so forth. I think that is causing a blowback that could show up in polls pretty fast. The other stuff that Trump is doing in terms of cutting like medical research or whatever he's cutting, I mean, the polls I've seen, it's funny watching like CNN. Harry Enton does a good job. He'll show the poll, and then the person he's doing the segment with is always shocked that whatever Doge cut that, the liberal commentator thinks is super unpopular has like 50 or 51 or as high as 54% of people saying that, yeah, we like what Doge is doing. We think this is mostly fraud, waste, and abuse, not really important stuff. Is it a super majority? No, it's not 80%, but we live in a really closely divided country. So to have, I saw polling that, yeah, these cuts are at 51%. Well, Trump's popular vote, which was impressive, is still like only 48.8%. So rather than people who voted for Trump abandoning him because he's doing this, it's actually people, the numbers would suggest, who maybe didn't vote for Trump, who nevertheless like some of that stuff he's doing. So I would put that in that category. I think that's an area where the elite opinion does not necessarily match what the people think. The tariffs, I think, might be a different matter, where the pain of those are going to be felt quickly, and that will show up in the polling. But that could just be my own personal, I don't like the tariffs and I do like the cuts. So maybe I'm just telling you what I want, want to be the case.
Yeah. Senator.
If the impact of tariffs are that they're put in place and you can identify a measurable increase in price on specific products that people are sensitive to, then I think it can have an impact. I have a slightly different take, though. That what we've seen is the markets drop, not because tariffs have a negative impact on the economy per se, but because the movement back and forth on what's being tariffed and who's being tariffed has created a perspective of uncertainty among market participants, and that demands a higher risk premium. And when you demand a higher risk premium for your investment, your multiple on P/E multiple goes down. So what you're seeing is a reduction in PE multiples across the board, because investors are demanding a higher risk premium, because there's greater uncertainty. Now, for better or for worse, that can all go away in a big hurry. If next week there's some decision on agreement on tariffs for Canada, and they come to some settlement or status quo agreement, do the same in Mexico, then that's going to change quite quickly. But at the moment, I don't see it happening for another few weeks.
All right, thank you for that. Let me say one thing about scientific research. Okay, everybody's against waste, fraud, and abuse. No one would say we need more waste, fraud, and abuse. Then you say, okay, here's a category of cancer research. Okay, and let's say you got a friend whose spouse or kid had that kind of cancer. That person is going to say, I think the federal government should spend as much as possible to try to find a cure for that kind of cancer, right? That's just human nature. The way the media covers this is any dollar cut for a veteran or for cancer research is evil, and that's the way some Americans think about it. And if you are a veteran, or if you have a child with that disease, you're going to say, don't cut that. But it's not the case that cancer type X. It's not the case that the taxpayers want to fund unlimited research into that disease. Just not the case, because there's too many things to fund. And you could say that about eradication of disease in Africa. You could say that about education, but we're not going to fund unlimited in anything, even the most sympathetic thing. And I think part of the problem now is you've got these scientists who are very sympathetic, saying, I've devoted my life to eradicating X. And we used to spend $6 billion a year on X, and now we're going to spend nothing on X, or we're going to spend eradicating X. We're going to spend $200 million.
To be clear, though, just so that your viewers understand what's actually happening, the $800 million in cuts for Johns Hopkins were not NIH cuts.
Correct.
These were cuts in programs that were specially directed to Johns Hopkins for a variety of reasons, some through USAID, some I think through other mechanisms. So at least to date, there have been no cuts to funding for NIH. There was a proposed reduction in the overhead allocation from a negotiated level up around 30, 40, 50%. Down to 15%, but that has been stayed by the courts.
Correct.
So it hasn't got into effect yet. So just so that,
yes, you're absolutely right.
There's a lot of hot talk about cuts to NIH, but there haven't actually been any yet.
Right.
And those that are advocating for the reduction in the overhead reimbursement would argue, maybe correctly or incorrectly, that they're not cutting the grant to the physician or the doctor or the researcher. They're cutting the overhead payment to the institution at which that doctor works. Money's fungible, I get it, but it's an important distinction.
100%. There are some scientists, though, who either have been fired or are quitting, who say they're going because they've been strongly led to believe that these cuts are coming.
Sure, because of especially at Johns Hopkins, because of the 800 million in other funding that was cut, or Columbia, at least tentatively.
There's them, but I'm talking about people in the government, not at these universities. Okay, Senator, you have to leave at 6:30, right?
I'll go 6:35 because
6:35.
Robbie's such a good guy, and you're doing a great job.
All right, I'm gonna run through the rest of my news, and then you guys can comment on any of the things you want. Okay, Russia, complete confusion. If you look at all the news accounts of the Russian government's reaction, there are ones that say, great, they're open to a ceasefire, and there are ones that say, no, they're not open to a ceasefire. Witkoff is supposed to be meeting with Putin tonight. If it's really tonight, I'm not a genius about time zones, but it's late in Moscow. So if they met, they probably met, but I've not seen that they've actually met. But he's supposed to meet with Putin. It seems to me it's on track, but we don't really know. Okay, Trump Tower. I live a mile from Trump Tower. I have a lot of meetings in that area. I walk past it all the time. Trump likes people to go into the lobby of Trump Tower to buy stuff, eat at the restaurants in the food court down at the bottom of the beautiful golden escalator. It's way too open. Now, the streets are closed. There's tons of security around, even when the president's not in town. But the reality is anybody who wants to can walk into the lobby of Trump Tower. So today, Noah, do we have this picture? I don't even know. Do we have this picture of the scene in Trump Tower?
We do not.
We do not. All right. Go on your phone and look at it. There's just swarms of people in the atrium of Trump Tower. And they went in with like shirts, and these are related to the former Columbia graduate student who's imprisoned in Louisiana or detained in Louisiana. And they did a big protest. It's a great picture. I wish we had it, but my fault for not requesting it. But I'll just tell you, they can't, Trump Tower just can't be that open. They're going to have to find some other place to sell hats and shirts. I know Donald Trump likes the sales, but it's crazy how open that is. Today, Columbia, relatedly, has expelled or suspended some students who took over a campus building during pro-Palestinian protests last spring and has temporarily revoked the diplomas of some students who have since graduated. Interesting timing. I don't know why Columbia is doing that now. All right. Arizona Democratic Congressman Raul Grijalva passed away after battling cancer, and tons of speculation all day about whether Pete Buttigieg would be a good presidential candidate or not. And I'll be curious to know what you two think about that. There's a lot of disdain for him on the right. And it's funny because some people who think he'd be a good candidate to win a general election say, well, he's got appeal on the right. The right hates the guy. I mean, they probably would hate any Democrat, but they have special animus for Pete Buttigieg. So before you comment on any of those topics, I'll remind you again, Trump Tower, Russia, Pete Buttigieg, Senator, what's going to happen to the Senate seat that Jeanne Shaheen, who you both beat and were beaten by for the same Senate seat, who's going to be the next senator from New Hampshire?
I don't know.
Oh, my goodness. What's your best guess?
I will say this about those other important news items.
Yeah.
I'm betting on Rahm Emanuel right now. Rahm would crush Buttigieg in a primary. It would be just roadkill. Now, they're not going to be like a head-on-head Democrat primary, but getting excited about Pete Buttigieg maybe running for president, boy, I don't want. You don't want to be in that Democrat party. You doesn't have much of a future.
You weren't in the House with Rahm, right? You were in the Senate by the time.
Oh, yeah, no. Did Rahm? I mean, I know Rahm. Yeah, I think we had 2 years of overlap, maybe in the House.
Okay.
I mean, I've been close enough to him to be horrified by his crooked finger. But yeah, he's smart. He's ambitious. He's aggressive. He has a wealth of experience. He understands messaging and communication. I mean, you're going to be mayor of Chicago. You're going to be tough.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, I'm not supporting him, but I just think he's the kind of person who in this new populist environment on both sides of the aisle, he's the kind of person that can navigate it.
I will say, I say this just objectively with no commentary. Republicans I know are much higher on Rahm's chances to win the nomination than are Democrats I know.
Oh, that's interesting.
For what that's worth. Robbie, comment. Russia, Trump Tower access, Pete Buttigieg, Rahm Emanuel, whatever you like.
On the Pete Rom thing, who's doing interesting things right now to set himself up for a run is actually, I mean, I never thought in a million years I would say this. Gavin Newsom, this podcast he's doing is making him, I think, a more relatable or appealing figure. He talked to Charlie Kirk. He just talked to Steve Bannon. I watched some of it. He seems likable in a way that's going to do him a lot of good. There's something to be said about this new podcast environment. I mean, we're participating in a new media venture here that allows people to just talk. It's less scripted. It's there. You can be genuine in it. You can succeed in it. Kamala Harris, obviously, I don't think is someone who could necessarily succeed in it, and that's what we saw during the last campaign. But Gavin Newsom is demonstrating that there's some personality, despite a lot of California policies that made people upset. I don't know.
I'll disagree with you strenuously. He is pissing off the left by platforming these figures who are not
a good idea.
Well, but he's also go read Charlie Kirk's tweet from I think it was a tweet, or maybe he appeared on a show. Charlie trashed Gavin today. Charlie's like, that guy's a cynical clown. He's switching his positions for political expediency. Like, he's not. I don't see who he's winning over, except for you. And not an important constituency. I think I love the fact that he's talking to them because I think it's good for the country, and I think the conversations are interesting. I don't think I never thought he was unlikable as kind of the reputation. I think he's a likable guy. But in terms of politics and positioning for 28, I think this is a death knell. I really do.
If he does what John Fetterman started doing this, and I didn't believe it at first, and now I think he sincerely seems like a moderate, and he's massively
here's the difference.
Favorability with
Robbie getting behind Fetterman for president.
Robbie, here's the difference. Here's the difference. When Fetterman does it, the Republicans praise him. Yeah. He's every Republican's favorite Democrat right now. When Newsom does it, the people he talks to trash him.
He started though. Give him a couple more months at this.
All right, Senator.
So, briefly, because I do have to depart, but on the other topics, I think Russia just can't be seen running to the table simply because Ukraine and the U.S. came to an agreement on a ceasefire. That looks weak, I'm sure, in their mind. So they're going to want to have a meeting with the U.S. of some sort, maybe with Rubio. You mentioned Wickoff is going there. Maybe they'll even demand a one-on-one meeting with the president prior to engaging in the ceasefire talks. But I think they will come to the table probably within the week. And if you get both parties at the table with, quote unquote, Donald Trump, I think they're going to come to an agreement. And we'll have plenty of time to decide what's wrong with the agreement and why it's not perfect and who won and who lost. But for 80% of the American people, getting that conflict stopped is a big political win for Trump. And on the Columbia student, the protest, but the Columbia student, I thought the Journal had a pretty thoughtful editorial today, and they made the point. It is clear in the issuance of the green card, the permanent resident visa, that you not associate, support, or align yourself with terrorists. It's a legal requirement. And so this individual may well have violated that. So they may be eligible for deportation. But, and I certainly agree with this, it's important that you go through an adjudicated process, the legal process associated with dealing with an issue like that. So hopefully that's what the Trump administration pursues. And, I think it's an important step if the allegations are true and he violated those terms. More broadly, Columbia, why did Columbia do what it's doing? Because the single most important failure at Columbia and other universities during these protests was a failure to discipline students for things like destroying property, disrupting classes, threatening other students. These are things that should not be allowed to occur on a university campus. And so they're sort of quickly, retroactively showing that they can do what they should have done many months ago.
Let me say three quick things before you go. Number one, the Wall Street Journal editorial board is sometimes derided. Sometimes I think they're a little too cutesy. The senator's right. Their editorial today was a national service in how fairly and smartly they had defined what's going on. And they said, here's the facts we need to know. Number two, there is no senator who's been more principled about the balance between national security and civil liberties in our lifetime than John Sununu. No one's been more principled about it. It's absolutely true. And it's such a hard thing to do, particularly if you're on the wrong side of the balance of thought in your party, to say we need to balance national security and civil liberties. And you've done it throughout.
Just for your viewers who don't know what you're talking about, and I only say it because it was important to me. It was one of the more fun things I did. But I led a small group of Republicans who joined all the Democrats filibustering the renewal of the Patriot Act, because we felt there weren't enough protections for things like issuance of national security letters, the warrant and the standard you need to do roving wiretaps. And the Republicans, led by Roberto Gonzalez, who was an idiot, said at the time, oh, no, don't worry. We won't abuse these things. The principle here is, even if I know you're not going to abuse it, it's the next attorney general and the next judge in the FISA court, right? And the next head of the CIA. So anyways, we were successful in the filibuster. We added a number of protections. And sadly, every one of our concerns about abuse of national security letters, abuses within the FISA court, not everyone, but most of them came true. And so it's just a good lesson that you really do have to be very cautious and very thoughtful in setting up those protections. So
I appreciate you providing the details.
Thumbs up,
I appreciate providing the details, but I think everybody knows all that information.
No, they don't. Nobody.
It was an act of intellectual and political bravery. And not very many members of Congress are willing to do that. So grateful to you. And last thing I would say is always grateful to have you on, even if you wouldn't tell us your brother's Senate plans. Delighted to have you here. Hope you'll come back soon.
I will look forward to coming back. Robbie, my only regret in my post-Senate life is that I haven't written articles for Reason Magazine. Maybe someday I'll rectify that.
We would be
happy very much.
To have you.
Maybe a double byline. Senator, thank you. My best to your family. All right, Robbie. Thank you for staying. You probably were not a big fan of the Patriot Act, I'm guessing.
Absolutely not whatsoever. And I will say I am troubled about this actions being taken against this Columbia student, which I looked at a little bit more closely today. I wrote an article for Reason about it. I agree that in terms of the legal matter, it is perhaps defensible to take action and review the green card status. I'm not going to make a legal or a constitutional argument. It's murky, frankly, the extent to which First Amendment rules based on case laws apply in situations like this. We always do have to remember the First Amendment is a general restriction against the government's actions, not necessarily saying these are the people who get rights. It's saying the government can't do X, Y, and Z. But different court cases have gone different ways. So I'm not sure about the legal matter, but I would like to hear from the government a more solid argument for why they're doing this to this person. Now, absolutely, I've seen lots of disgusting pro-Hamas, terrorist adjacent activism on college campuses, not denying that whatsoever. I find it appalling. I'm utterly against it. Many of it coming from students who are Americans and citizens who were born here, who, ancestors came over on the Mayflower. But for this guy in particular, I want to see more a presentation made for what is his ties to Hamas, because if it's just not all of the protesting, I think it's fair to say that it's necessarily pro-Hamas. If you're saying you disagree with what Israel is doing or that kind of nature. And I've seen a little bit of slippery slope as I've heard government officials describe this case from first, oh, he's pro-Hamas, to then it's, oh, he's pro-Palestinian, to then it's just, the person who talked to NPR just said, well, he's just protesting. We wouldn't allow someone to come here and if we knew they were going to do protesting. And I'm like, well, that's a pretty cherished First Amendment right that to protest. I mean, what if you just, is that even necessarily anti-American to say, well, this conflict is going on and it's really sad and I don't think we should be involved in it. So I am troubled by what they're doing. It could be there's a perfectly solid case, but to me, they have not proved their case to me yet.
I couldn't agree more, and brilliantly said. I'm very grateful to you for saying it exactly the way you did. All right, time for your questions. If you'd like to ask Robbie a question, can't ask Senator Sununu a question. He's gone, but Robbie's here. raise your hand. We'll get to lots of you this time, and no barrier, unlike on the morning show where we threaten to kill the program if we don't have new questioners. Return questioners very welcome here. So please come on in. As always, tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind. And we begin with Hugo. Hugo, welcome in. Got to unmute. You got to unmute one more time. Give it a try. There you go.
Nice to meet you, Robbie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hey, listen, I have just a question that's been bugging me all day. I know the GOP Republicans have a reputation for being anti-environmental. Oh, I don't know why in the world they want to. But let me see. I wrote this down. Let me see. I wanted to say, why in the world does the GOP want to once again become the party of unrestricted pollution? Talking about what happened today with the EPA administrator and his push for being the agency for increased commerce in the United States. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
Any comments?
Great question. We talked about that this morning. Robbie, what do you think?
Look, I think the conservative view is that agencies like the EPA, yes, that are important for mitigating harms to the environment, but that those efforts can strangle businesses or frustrate property owners in exercising jurisdiction over their own properties. And also more broadly, I would say that the American people can only put up with so much. Your life is going to be worse. Even if you think this is good, it's not politically popular enough that your life needs to involve more inconvenience to protecting the planet in the future. And also the same thing is not being asked of the polluters elsewhere in the world who are going to continue to pollute as aggressively. I don't know about you, brother, but I am so annoyed by my frickin' dryer that I have an EPA mandated energy efficient one that doesn't actually dry my clothes, and I gotta run it through 5 cycles and they're still damp. There's no way this is saving energy because I just run it over and over and over again. And that's green energy standards that make people's lives worse and are frustrating, and I don't think are actually helping.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't mean we should get rid of all environmental protection.
Yep. Hugo,
Right.
thank you.
So-
Yeah, go ahead real quick.
I just wanted to say, all viewers who hate the low water flush toilets, raise your hands.
Yeah.
Nobody?
Big-
Okay, there's a
Big
couple. There's a few.
big constituency. Hugo, thank you for coming on. Appreciate having you here. Come back regularly. All right. Matthew, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind, please.
Yeah, hi. I'm Matthew. I'm from the New York City area. And a couple points that I wanted to raise, and then I had a question for Robbie, is that one of the two things that I think about the Khalil case that have not really been made it into the mainstream media are twofold.
Mhm.
First of all, the SJP toolkit that has actually provided a great deal of evidence against a lot of the protesters was released on 10/8. Which suggests a degree of coordination with Hamas that has not often been reported. I also want to read something to you that's very, very critical about the First Amendment. And this has to do with something that's in the SJP toolkit. It says, "We, as Palestinian students in exile, are part of this movement, not in solidarity with this movement," which suggests to me that what SJP is declaring here is that they are actually an arm of Hamas, not just simply a political movement that is advancing the cause of Hamas. That places them in an entirely different category, and it deprives them of a lot of the First Amendment protections, in which many people in the press have attributed to them.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to ask you is, what I was puzzled by was that the administration chose as its test case somebody who has a green card. It's not just simply here on a student visa, but has the green card as well, which makes it a much more difficult case to prove.
Absolutely.
So why do you think that was an error on their part, or do you think they're trying to make this even more ambitious? You think it was an error?
reading between the lines, it very clearly looks like an error. It seems like they were surprised to learn that he had a green card, which speaks to basic competence, because I agree very much with what you just said. I have looked at the SJP toolkit. I have cited that in arguments with people on the pro-Palestinian cause who are saying, no, this isn't solidarity with terrorism. This is just XYZ. And I'll say, well, look at this major student group that is in your coalition. Read their literal words. It's not just sympathy for the Palestinian cause. It is celebrating a terrorist act. I think that's the more powerful argument for getting you close to saying it's an arm of Hamas or something. But I'm always a little nervous about echoing the same rhetoric, because when I say that I really want a deal between, Ukraine and Russia, and Ukraine can't win this war, and the best way is a deal, then I'll go on, mainstream places, and they'll say, oh, you're a Putin propagandist. You're in line, you're in league with Russia because you're saying things that they happen to agree with. And
Right.
I see,
but you didn't sign a manifesto saying you're in league with Putin, right? But right. I take your point, and your point is a good one, but it is slightly different. Let me ask you this: do you guys know? Is there any other case in the pipeline? Is there any other protester who they've detained, or is he the only one?
I have not heard of any.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Whether you have.
So
Yeah.
I would say
they picked a bad case. They picked an edge case.
I would say they either made a mistake, or it's possible that they know stuff they haven't revealed, right? Yeah. In other words, if he did something unambiguously clear that would politically and legally justify his detainment and his expulsion from the country, then a green card case would be stronger for them, right? Because they say, well, if we can do it for someone with a green card, then we can do it for somebody, with a lower barrier, lower standard. So we'll have to see, but it certainly appears like it. And again, if it's up to judges, you can't say it was dumb. If they end up with a sympathetic judge and the higher courts uphold it, then it'll turn out to be smart. But it certainly seems at a minimum risky and asking for trouble because of the higher standard, because it's a green card holder. Matthew, thank you for coming on. Great question. Very much appreciated. All right. Robbie, are you winded or are you good?
I'm good.
You're good. All right.
Go on that.
Say again. All right, let's keep going. Brian, come on in. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind after you unmute.
Hi, I'm from the land of Lincoln. Remember we lead the league in governors going to jail?
Yes, sir.
Yep. So I work for the nuclear power industry. We were just in DC for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It's a big gathering. The NRC puts on a yearly convention, about 3,500 of us. And I ran into a girl that worked for the VA. She used to work for me on and off, and she wanted me to make these points because she saw me last time when I was on your show. So she said at the VA, when she was hired, she got hired like as a G7, a little bit higher, that she was told that they could be fired at any time. And they originally said, hey, you're on 2 years probation. And she said, okay, well, if I'm going to be on 2 years probation, I need more money. You got to up it. So they said, no, that doesn't how it works. We'll tell you out, we'll make it 1 year and we're going to pay you this. So she agreed. So she told me flat out that they were told within that first year that they could be let go. Second thing she told me about was, she said that
how long ago was she hired?
Well, she had to be less than a year because she took the package.
But she was hired under Trump or under Biden?
Well, let's see. It had to be Biden.
Fine. Okay.
Yeah, because she's looking for a job now. I just saw her in DC.
Okay.
So she took the package, and they're not making them work.
Yeah.
Basically they're getting 8 months of pay plus 8 months of benefits, and they can go on their way. So she said she saw the handwriting on the wall because she said her office, she did medical records here in Illinois. She said basically, there was too many people in the office. If they're going to downsize, I'm the new guy, I'm going to get whacked. So that's why she went down that path. So she just said, I'm leaving.
Interesting.
So, and she also pointed me to, have you ever heard of the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey? It's put out by the OPM.
Office of Personnel Management. Yeah.
Right. So this survey, I looked at it, and it asked the question, and it asked all the government, you could break it down by group, by employees, everything else. And one of the questions was, what happens to people in the workforce that underperform? And right now, if you look at the government, it says 40% remain in the workforce and they continue to work and underperform. 40%. So that's why she told me that she thought that that there could be make some adjustments, and it wasn't as bad as people think. And then finally, she gave me this one last comment to make. She said she's tired of the VA. So she was a Marine. She was a lioness. You know what that is?
I don't.
A lioness is a person that went into Afghanistan in the craziest places, and the women would talk to the women because the women, Afghanistan girls, would not talk to the men. So that she could go in and talk to the women and the kids.
Interesting.
And say, hey, where are the bombers going to be? So, I mean, she could kick my ass, just to let you know. And she said, you know, instead of them complaining about the VA, she said, hey, 17.6 suicides per day for VA. She said that you got a better chance to die by suicide than in combat.
That's right. And
then she said that it's higher for females. They get 52.2 million for suicide prevention. She said instead of all of these people complaining, all the senators, she said, why don't you take that 175 billion you gave to Ukraine and take care of our people?
Right.
And then
Brian,
I asked, I'm sorry, I asked her.
Go ahead.
Right.
I want to let Robbie respond. Robbie, go ahead.
Yeah, look, this is a large part of Trump's appeal is that he said, we've spent all this money on all these foreign causes, and that's something elite consensus is always in favor of doing, that when you actually ask the American people in both parties that there isn't the support for that. They want that money spent at home. They say, we have problems here. Why are we prioritizing everything else under the sun? That was Trump's most effective moments in his joint address to Congress the other week, was when he was just listing, and not all of it is, we're not going to rebalance the federal government. Just getting rid of foreign aid packages is not going to happen. We'd have to look at our entitlements, but it is popular to say, why is that being spent there instead of on people like our veterans, like our infrastructure, et cetera? That's the power really of Trump's appeal, that he understood that in a way a lot of people running both parties did not.
Brian, thank you. Very much appreciate it. All right. No disrespect to my dad, but here's America's most handsome grandpa. Chris Taylor, that's you, dude. Unmute. Chris doesn't like to just be eye candy, Robbie. So
he's shy.
Listen to what he says, but also behold America's most handsome grandpa.
Hey, I'm in Northern Idaho. I actually have 3 of my grandchildren here with us this week.
How old are they?
4 through 1.
4 through 1. Robbie, express your disbelief that someone who looks like Chris Taylor could even be a grandpa.
I do have disbelief. You're
just making sure. Mr. Taylor, welcome in. Tell us what's on your mind tonight.
So still in Northern Idaho. All right, so this is conjecture that I heard yesterday, and just throwing it out there to see, is this on track or is it off? But so the setup is, why would Trump play the tariff game, if you will, before cutting government, before cutting taxes, before loosening regulations? In other words, he's even threatening recession. Like he's basically saying, yes, this could happen.
Right.
And then there was what might happen out of that. So go ahead.
All right, Robbie, why not wait on the tariff war to do this other stuff, which would be more popular and less risky?
Look, he thinks he's going to use tariffs as a diplomatic tool, right? That's what's a little bit different about this. There are some ideological people and both, economic populists who thinks tariff is good policy to build industries in our country, thinks it's like actually good economic policy. A lot of economists disagree with that. That's the whole debate. Trump is doing them because he wants Canada and Mexico and China and the European Union to behave differently. And he's used to making threats and kind of it working out and getting his way. Now, I don't think it's good to be careening wildly from, we're doing them, we're not doing them, we're doing them, but with exceptions that cover virtually everyone. We're not doing them, we're doing them again. But I think his thinking is he can score a really swift diplomatic win with respect to these countries. And so the pain isn't going to last very long because they're not going to actually be doing them. That is the best read I have into his motivations. And it's like, we're not actually doing tariffs because we want to prop up some specific firm or some specific industry. We're doing them because we want different policy from Canada and the EU, and he thinks he'll get it rapidly. Just like he yelled at Zelensky last week, and now we think if Russia's playing ball, we're sitting down to a deal. Like, that's how he operates, and it works out, from the conservatives' perspective, more often than his critics give him credit for.
Chris, your quick follow.
Okay, so the follow-up was, the interesting point was, is he doing this because he actually wants to cause pain that will enable him to get the outcry that's needed for cutting taxes, for cutting regulations, in other words, is he actually trying to squeeze to get other policy done? No,
he's, as Robbie said, he thought people would cave, and he can't back down at this point. But no, he does not want to create a crisis to then be able to have leverage. And those other projects are on track. He doesn't need the leverage of a self-created crisis to pass reconciliation, or at least so it appears from this vantage point. Chris, enjoy the grandkids. Give our best to your son.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for coming on. Robbie, couldn't have enjoyed having you on more, and I hope you'll come back regularly.
It's been my pleasure. I'd love to do this anytime. Nice chatting.
If people want to see your work, where is it on offer?
You can go to Reason Magazine, reason.com. You can also follow me on Twitter. It's just my name. And I host a YouTube show for The Hill called Rising that you can find on YouTube. You can watch me there.
How often is that on, and when does it drop?
Every day. Our videos start rolling out about 11 a.m. noon. We tape for 2 hours, and it's a right-left debate show with a bunch of rotating. I'm the right person and rotating people on the left. We've had Marianne Williamson in a couple times recently. That's been fun. So check it out.
All right, we should have her on here. Again, couldn't be more grateful to you and Senator Sununu for coming on, and we hope you'll come back.
My absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Oops, cut you off, but thank you, sir. All right, tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time, we'll be back. Sean, Dan, and I for the morning meeting. We'll see you then. Tomorrow night on this program, I have an opportunity to see some of what we recorded earlier this week. Table 17, our musical comedy variety chat show. Senator Bob Kerrey, comedian Sherrod Small, amongst our guests. So you'll be able to watch some of that tomorrow night. As we say in the business, you won't want to miss it. And then a reminder that coming up on the put up number 14, please, because I have to read from the graphic because I have a bad memory. Our second private event, only for two-way community members, with David Bahnsen on March 17th, 5 p.m. Eastern time. So that's coming up in 4 days. David Bahnsen and I will be talking about the markets and how you can think about what's happening, what might happen. David, if you've seen him here on the program, he's the sponsor of our show, but he's also one of the smartest people I know about the intersection between politics and policy in the economic realm. And as always on Two Way, he'll be here to answer your questions. This event will not stream on YouTube. You have to watch it here on the Two Way platform. So please go to our website, twoway.tv/TBG, the Bahnsen Group, TBG, and sign up to be part of it, a chance to hear from David on what's going on in the markets. Not just, we'll talk about what's going on in the markets on March 17th, but also longer term, how you can think about the Trump policies and the general trend in America. And then I've recommended to you this before, a newsletter I read regularly every time it gets in my inbox, Dividend Cafe, written by David and the folks of the Bahnsen Group. It costs nada, nothing, zilch, zero, but its value is worth much more than that. And all you need to do to subscribe is go to, again, twoway.tv/TBG, and you'll see a little button there allowing you to subscribe to the Dividend Cafe. I read it, and you should read it too. It's a great source of information, and like everything David does, it is both sophisticated and accessible. Grateful to you all for joining. Grateful for those who asked questions. Thank you for raising your hand. I'm sorry we didn't get to more of you. I loved our two guests, and I hope they come back, and I hope you will too tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Have a great evening. Good night.